always the thinking. Before the words, before the shape of what the words would eventually carry, before even the understanding that there was something that needed to be said. The thinking. The long, patient, going nowhere in particular thinking that is not the productive kind and not the ruminative kind, but the third kind. The kind that has no destination and no agenda, and that moves through the interior the way weather moves through a landscape. Changing things without announcing the change, leaving the territory different without any single moment of the difference being visible. I have been in that thinking for a long time. Not about one thing. That would be simpler and also less true. About several things simultaneously, the way the interior works when it is genuinely engaged rather than performing engagement. The things are related in the way that the deep things are always related. Not obviously, not in the cause and effect chain that the surface analysis would produce, but in the underneath. In the place where the roots of different trees are the same root system. What I have been thinking about is words. Specifically, the words that take the longest. The ones that are not slow because they are difficult to find. They are slow because they cannot be said until you are certain of them. Until the thinking has gone far enough to arrive at the version of the true thing that is actually true rather than the version that is true enough. True enough is fast. It is available almost immediately. It is the version of the thing that passes the surface inspection, that holds up against the casual examination, that most people will accept as the honest expression of the interior, and that you know in the specific, private way of someone who has been in their own interior long enough to know the difference, is not the whole of it. The whole of it takes longer. I want to explain what I mean by deeply. Not deeply in the aesthetic sense. Not the performed seriousness of someone who wants to be understood as a person who thinks carefully about things. The actual thing. The specific quality of the engagement with a thought that does not stop when the first satisfying version of the thought arrives. That continues past the comfortable conclusion into the territory that the comfortable conclusion was trying to avoid. That is willing to find out that the thing you thought is not actually what you think. That discovery, the discovery that the position you had settled into is not the real position, that the thing you were about to say is the half-true version, that there is more underneath what you're prepared to offer, is the beginning of the actual thinking. Most thinking ends before it gets there, not from laziness. From the specific protective instinct of the person who has found a satisfying version and does not want to find out that the satisfying version is insufficient. The satisfying version is comfortable. It explains things. It provides the sense of having understood something. It allows you to speak with the specific quiet authority of someone who has thought about this. The further thinking removes the authority, takes you back into the uncertainty, into the not yet knowing, into the specific uncomfortable position of someone who has found the floor of one understanding and has not yet found the floor of the deeper one. You are floating without the satisfying version to stand on, without the next version yet available. The floating is where the actual words come from. The first version of what I wanted to say about this arrived about 3 years ago. Not 3 years ago in a single moment. 3 years ago is the beginning of a long process of the arriving. The process is not linear. I want to say that clearly because the description of it as a process implies a directionality that was not consistently present. It moved forward and backward and sideways, and sometimes for months it did not seem to move at all. The apparent stillness was not stillness. The thinking was continuing below the level of the visible. The roots were going deeper even when the surface showed nothing. The first version said something true. It said, "The words that matter most are the ones said after the thinking is complete." That version felt sufficient when I first arrived at it. It had the specific quality of the insight that has been reached through genuine effort, the arrived at feeling, the sense of the floor under the feet. Then I kept thinking, and I found that the floor was false. The words that matter most are not the ones said after the thinking is complete. The thinking is never complete. There is no arrival at the finished understanding from which the perfect words can then be issued. The waiting for the complete thinking is the waiting that produces the years of silence, the decades of the unsaid. The specific, accumulated cost of the person who has been waiting for the certainty before the speaking and has discovered too late in too many cases that the certainty does not arrive before the speaking. The certainty arrives through the speaking, is produced by it, requires the saying as part of its own completion. So the second version said, "Say the words before the thinking is complete." And that version also felt like the floor. And then I kept thinking, there is a specific person who taught me the most about the words that take a long time, not through instruction, through the specific, involuntary, completely unintended teaching of someone who does a thing so naturally and so consistently that the person watching them eventually understands something about the thing that the doing reveals. She does not speak until she is ready, not ready in the performance sense, ready in the actual sense. The specific interior readiness of someone who will not offer a version of what they're thinking until they have checked the version against the thing they are actually thinking and found them to be the same thing. Jack is visible if you're paying the right kind of attention. There is a pause before she speaks that is not the pause of someone choosing their words. It is the pause of someone checking their words against the truth of them. Verify, making sure that what is about to come out of the mouth is the thing that is actually in the interior rather than the available approximation of it. The check takes less than a second. In that less than a second, something happens that most people skip. She asks, is this what I actually think? And if the answer is not entirely yes, she waits. Does not produce the not entirely yes version. Holds the not yet ready thing in the interior until the interior has produced the ready version. Sometimes this takes a moment. Sometimes it takes a day. Sometimes she comes back to a conversation after 24 hours with a thing she was not ready to say the day before. I have watched this for long enough to understand that the pause is not hesitation. It is the most active thing she does. I want to say something about what gets lost when words come too fast, not the obvious thing. The obvious thing is that fast words are sometimes imprecise, sometimes wrong, sometimes the not yet finished version of the thought offered before the finish has been reached. That is true, and it is not what I mean. What gets lost is the relationship between the speaker and the words. The words that come too fast belong to the mouth rather than to the person. The person is somewhere slightly behind them. The words have outrun the person who is supposedly saying them. They are the available version, the version that language produces when it is operating ahead of the thinking rather than behind it. Competent, often correct, occasionally even insightful, but not fully inhabited, not owned in the specific sense of something you have checked against the truth of yourself and found to be accurate. The inhabited word is different in quality, not different in content necessarily. Two people can say the same sentence, one from the available version, one from the deeply thought version, and the sentences will be identical in content and different in everything else. The inhabited version has a weight to it, a settledness, the specific quality of something that has been lived in rather than just produced. The person receiving it knows the difference even if they cannot identify it. It lands differently, in a different place, with a different staying power. The inhabited word stays. The available word passes through. Here is what the deep thinking has produced about love, about the specific, particular thing I want to say about love that has taken the longest to arrive at the inhabited version. Love is not the feeling. I've said versions of this before, different versions at different levels of the thinking. The first version said, love is a choice, true and sufficient. The second version said, love is the sustained choosing across conditions. True and still insufficient. The third version said, love is what remains when the feeling has settled into its sustainable form. Closer. Still not the floor is this. Love is the specific quality of attention you give to one person that you do not give to the world. Not the warmth. Everyone has warmth from multiple people, not the care. The care is also distributed across many, not even the commitment in the formal sense. The attention, the specific, particular, this person receives something that is not available to others, quality of the noticing, the way one person's interior becomes the thing you are genuinely interested in understanding, not as a project, not as the solving of a puzzle, as the ongoing, never finished, perpetually compelling engagement with a specific other consciousness that you find more interesting and more important and more worth the attending than any general category of interesting things. Love's interest, not the polite interest of the person who is listening while waiting to speak, the specific, rare, irreplaceable interest of someone who is genuinely curious about what is happening in another person's interior, who wants to know what they think not because the knowing is useful, but because the thinking of that specific person is the kind of thinking you want to be in contact with. Who notices the change in them the way you notice changes in weather when you are paying the kind of attention to the sky that only certain people pay? The attention is love. Everything else is what the attention produces over time. This took a long time to understand because I was looking for love in the feeling category. The feeling is real. I am not dismissing the feeling. The feeling is the signal. The way the body says, pay attention, this person, this one specifically. The signal is important. The signal is where it starts. But I was treating the signal as the thing, rather than as the announcement of the thing. Was measuring the love by the intensity of the signal rather than by the quality of the attention. Was concluding from the fading of the signal that the love was fading rather than that the signal had completed its job. The signal delivers you to the person. The attention is what you do when you arrive. Some people arrive and stop attending. They're delivered by the signal to the person, and then they are there, present, committed in the formal sense. But the quality of the attending has been withdrawn back into the general distribution. The person is now familiar. The familiar does not require the focused attending that the new required. The attention relaxes into the ambient. This is the specific loss that most relationships suffer without either person being able to name what has been lost. What has been lost is the attention, not the love. The love is still there as the general warmth. But the specific, irreplaceable, this person receives something unavailable to others quality of the attending that has distributed itself back into the general. And the person who is no longer receiving the specific attending can feel the difference without being able to name it. They feel less visible, less interesting, less specifically and precisely held in the mind of the person who is supposed to be holding them. They are right about what they feel. The specific attending has been withdrawn. The second thing that deep thinking produced, I want to say carefully, because it requires the careful saying. I have been wrong about patience. My understanding of patience for most of my life was organized around waiting. The patient person is the person who waits well, who does not demand the premature resolution, who can sustain the uncertainty of the not yet arrived, without converting the uncertainty into urgency that forces the situation into a resolution it was not ready for. That version of patience is real, and it is not what I mean. The patience I have been wrong about is the patience with people. I have been impatient with people in the specific way that the person who values the deep thinking is impatient. The impatience is not with slowness. It is with what I was reading as the absence of the depth. The person who offers the available version without the check, who speaks before the interior has been consulted, who produces the words that come fast in the way I described, the words that belong to the mouth rather than to the person. I was reading those words as the absence of depth in the person. I was wrong. The deep thinking is not the only valid relationship with the interior. Some people's interior is not organized around the structured going deeper. It is organized around the distributed, ambient, constantly available quality of the person who is genuinely open rather than genuinely deep. Who is present in the wide way rather than in the narrow way. Whose words come fast, not because they have skipped the checking, but because the checking happens differently, in real time, in the actual speaking. The speaking is the thinking rather than the report of the thinking that happened before. That version is also legitimate. I have not been treating it as legitimate. I have been treating it as the lesser version of what I do, as the talking before thinking that produces the available approximation rather than the inhabited word. I've been wrong about this for a long time, and the wrongness has produced a specific real cost and specific real people who were not doing the lesser version of the thing. They were doing a different version of the thing that I was not equipped to recognize as legitimate, because my instrument was calibrated to my own way of being in the interior. The instrument was wrong. The third thing, this one has taken the longest, is the most in progress of the three, has the least settled quality. I am offering it not from the arrived position, but from the still in the floating position, which is the honest position, which is the only position from which the unhardened version of it is available. I have been thinking about what it means to be understood, not known. I have thought about being known at length and in other places. Understood is different. Being known is about access. Being understood is about something more. It is about the other person, not just having the information of your interior, but having organized the information correctly. Having assembled it into the shape that is accurate to the actual thing, rather than the shape that the information most conveniently produces. The most convenient shape of a person is usually wrong. The convenient shape is assembled from the visible evidence, the things that are easiest to read, the surface behaviors, and the stated positions, and a specific way the person manages themselves in the observed conditions. From those things, a shape is assembled that is coherent and recognizable and often quite sophisticated. And wrong, not in the facts, in the interpretation of the facts. In the story, the assembler is telling about what the facts mean and what they say about who the person is at the root rather than at the surface. Most people are walking around being known in the wrong shape, not maliciously misshapen, just the convenient version rather than the accurate one, the version that the evidence most easily produces rather than the version that the evidence actually points to. If you look longer and more carefully and with the specific willingness to let the person be more complicated than the convenient shape allows. She sees me in the right shape. I've been trying to understand how she does this for the entire time. I have known her and I have not fully understood it. The best I have come to is this. She looks at the things I do not do as carefully as she looks at the things I do. She reads the silences and the absences and the specific places where my behavior is conspicuously not something as part of the information, where most people would read the absence as neutral, as the simple non-presence of a thing, rather than as a meaningful thing in its own right. She reads it as expressive, as part of the pattern, as the shape being made by the combination of the present and the absent. The shape she assembles from both is accurate. Uncomfortably, specifically, how does she know accurately? I want to say something about why the words take a long time that is different from everything I have said so far. Not the thinking, not the checking of the words against the truth of them, not the patience for the floating that precedes the floor. The other reason, the words take a long time because some of them are addressed to specific people, and the specific people are not in the room, are not yet in the room, or are no longer in the room, or are in the room in the changed form of what time and distance have made them into. And the words addressed to specific people require a specific person to be ready to receive them before the saying of them is the right choice. You cannot timestamp the words to the readiness. The readiness is unpredictable. It arrives when it arrives. The word is ready when the thinking is sufficiently complete. The person is ready when life has arranged them into the position of being able to receive the specific thing that word contains. The two readinesses do not coordinate, are frequently out of phase. The word is ready and the person is not yet available. The person is available and the word has not yet finished its thinking. The words that take a long time are often the ones waiting for the two readinesses to align. I am approaching the alignment now for several specific things, several specific words addressed to several specific people. The thinking is not complete. I have said already that the thinking is never complete and that waiting for the completion is the long silence. But the thinking has gone far enough, has produced the inhabited version rather than the available approximation, has arrived at the floor that feels like the actual floor rather than the floor that is also a ceiling for a deeper room. The words are ready. The people are in the room or coming into the room. What I want to say in the second part is the words themselves. Not all of them. Some are private in the way the most specific things are private, but the portion of them that belongs to the space, the portion that has been sitting in the interior long enough, that has been thought about deeply enough, that is no longer well served by the continued keeping. The kept word decays slowly, without announcement, in the specific way of anything that was meant to be in the world and has been held past the point of the useful holding. The decay is not the death of the word. The decay is the slow reduction of its specificity. Its particular addressed, this person receives this quality, becoming slightly more general over time. Slightly more like the category of the thing and slightly less like the irreplaceable, unique, cannot be said to anyone else version. The word must be given while it is still specific, while it still has the address on it, while the person it is for can feel themselves in it. The time is now. The thinking is deep enough. The words are coming.